everybody, this is seatbelt behavior. Welcome to Comprehensive Adjective Mapping. Today we are going to begin our latest, let's say, revisit with the adjective map as we've been using it for a good long while. The adjective map that I'll transmit over to you guys in just a second, and the one you're seeing on the screen was last updated in 2014. So here it is 2023, 2024 coming right up. I think we'll do a little 10-year update of this. And ideally, my goal is to finish it. So as we start working our way around the adjective map, I also want to draw to your attention there are some things that we talk about very commonly today that are not on the map. So even since this map was last assembled, our thoughts, other models have been integrated, other concepts have been laid out on it. There's a whole new set of adjectives that we can start to incorporate. And I think there's some movement in some of these adjectives that'll be very interesting to take a look at. But adjective mapping is what it's all about. So this process of choosing any adjective that describes humans' attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, thoughts, feelings, anything that we can use to describe the way they're experiencing a particular situation at a particular moment in time. Those are the kind of adjectives that we're looking for. And that is a rather tight subset of all the adjectives that are available to us as we try to communicate. Things like temperature and texture and all that. There's all kinds of adjectives. Anyway, so that's what I want to do. So part of this is going to be revisiting stuff, and part of it is going to be proposing new things. But what I thought I would like to start by doing is giving you guys the most basic square one orientation to the adjective mapping process. And so let me just slide this out of the way. I do want to send everyone this handout. Now there's a bunch of you. I'm going to transmit it over. It takes a couple of minutes. It's a very big file, but it'll show up and you can download it so you have the 2014 map that we're actually looking at. Okay, but to get this started, I want to just look at the nature of change for a second. So in the nature of change, just one moment. That's not what I want. I want the layers. Okay, so as we're looking at the layers, I want you to kind of see where this whole adjective map thing came from. It came from the merging of brilliance. It came quite literally from taking each and every one of these models of human behavior that we've been looking at over all these many years now and said, let's look at the types that they propose exist across humanity, however many that might be, 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, whatever the number happens to be. And then let's see what adjectives they use to describe each of those different types. And so as we start to look at from one map to another map, we see them as they are. We go like, well, these things do overlay. And if we can figure out how, as models become more and more specific in their typology, which adjectives are shifting, that helps us put the adjective exactly where we want it to be. So this real comprehensive adjective mapping is the result of this merging of brilliance, and specifically the part of the merging of brilliance that's really all about this idea that people create these maps, and we can look at them and really, find what it is that we're trying to understand about the subtleties and the nuances. Now, there's another little principle I wanted to share, but it's escaped me at the moment. So let's just kind of jump in and see where we end up. Any thoughts, comments before we jump in? Nope. Okay, so it was comparative human typological analysis. That's the part of your training where you would have done this. So what we do is we end up taking a look at different sorts of models, the most common of which is one that divides humanity into 4 different main energies, if you will, or whatever types they want to say, preferences, whatever. We call them outgrid, upgrid, ingrid, and downgrid, but you guys know that outgrid is driver and upgrid is expressive and ingrid is amiable and downgrid is analytical. So Today, I want to start by just looking at those four specific adjectives, because if you guys can understand how those all overlay on the change grid, it's going to become increasingly easy for us to start adding deeper and deeper layers. So those are the four main adjectives we want to be looking at. So now, if I said in the adjective mapping process, the first step is you propose an adjective. The second thing is you define that adjective. So right now we'd be looking up the specific adjective of driver, amiable, analytical, expressive that seems to best communicate what we believe that that adjective is really describing. But I think for the sake of today's little exercise, you guys will define driver sufficiently uniformly, or there'll be enough of a mutuality in your descriptions of it that I think we can just say we know the definition. So after we know the definition of something, we want to say, well, what's its primary energy? What's its secondary energy? So it's interesting that the actual adjective we're looking at is driven. So in which of the four energies do you think the adjective driven is going to most readily apply? Anybody? Spit it out. What do you think? The driven adjective describing someone as driven would most likely hold true if they were in which of these four quadrants?
Outgrid.
Outgrid, if they're the driver, because that's the whole adjective form of the noun. And so we kind of go like, we get that. That's great. So we know the primary energy is a given in this. But when we think about what's the secondary energy of the word driven, is it driven driver? Is that what we mean by driven? You got to be leaning further out grid, or is it expressive driver? You got to be leaning a little further up grid for it to make sense. You know, when you think of what energy the word driven contains, where in the outgrid quadrant are you plopping? Anybody thoughts?
Oh, out grid.
Okay, I'm out grid, that's where the driven is, but is driven as an adjective one that carries an even higher level of driven, so even further driven? You guys know what we're looking at here? Is this something that you guys are resonating with? That word driven, does it contain a little bit of driver energy, a moderate amount of driver energy, a lot of driver energy? Or does it encompass all of them? What are your guys' thoughts?
It sounds like it encompasses a lot of energy if you're truly driven by something. Like something
Okay.
is pulling you outward, uh, even more outward. Something
Right.
like
Right. And so, and again, we have to reach consensus around these sort of things. That's why I'm asking you guys, do you agree with that? Do you want to say something around it? The whole act of adjective mapping is reaching enough understanding of what we're trying to say that adjective is communicating. So get that clear enough. And then we have to decide where it goes on the change grid. And then we have to decide the next one, which I think is the biggest question of all, the most powerful subtlety or nuance, is what is its impact area? So when I talk about a given adjective like driven, does driven just hold true at this very intersection, but nowhere else inside of the driver quadrant? Or does driven have an impact zone that even if you're a little more out grid, we'd still say that adjective applies, in grid adjective applies? So a 1 degree, if you will, deviation would just mean that you could feel that driver or that driven adjective could hold true in any of these other 9 sorts of things. So it has an epicenter, the exact center of the quadrant, but what's its impact zone? So it goes back to that game of horseshoes and hand grenades. Some adjectives are extremely tight, very specific, in attempting to communicate what it is communicating, where others are more general. And so the impact zone of an adjective could be quite large. So would it be a stretch for me to say that all elements, all possibilities inside of the driver quadrant will share a driven adjective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's context that'll tell you what emphasis to place on that would be my reaction to that.
Right. And that's why we need the more specific adjectives to go the nuance, because the word driven itself could describe someone who is an expressive driver. We could say, well, they're driven.
Mhm.
The driven driver is driven. The analytical driver is driven. They're all driven.
And, that context that Kathy was just describing, I'm thinking, I could be driven by something because I'm interested in it, but I can also be driven even further that really encompasses a commitment out of me. That's going to drive me even further out. So
Right.
the more
And we will have
interested I
it.
become,
Right.
so that becomes something different.
Right. But though this is where we would say, but we would have a different adjective to
Mm,
describe what you just described.
mm,
You know
got
what
it.
I mean? It'd have to be driven plus other adjectives, because
Got
to
it.
say, oh, he's driven doesn't begin to tell the story,
Right,
right?
right. Got it.
And that's what my whole hope is for this whole adjective mapping process, is that as we each begin to appreciate the subtleties and nuances that each adjective contains or resonates or projects or whatever, we're developing a tremendous ability to understand the full range of human responses. And if we can describe them and we can then help other people to embrace them and understand them, how useful would a full map of human responses be to people who do the kind of work that we do? Yeah, I mean, am I crazy, or do you guys think like, no, that could be a handy thing to get a
Very,
conversation going? You know?
very handy. But how did you come up with the actual words themselves that like expresses that in these
because
areas?
because in this whole act of comparative human typological analysis, whole act of merging all these different models, all I did was I said, let's describe each of their types on each of these different layers. So, if we look at this one with the 8 types, there was a set of adjectives that described energizer and influencer and leader. And we just kept noticing which adjectives got repeated most frequently. That's what we did. We ended up developing kind of like a frequency of these adjectives appearing places, and thought the more frequently an adjective is chosen, that either means it's more useful in general ways, or it's describing some situation that is so prevalent that it demanded its own adjective
Okay.
to describe it. So I didn't come up with expressive or driver. I've made up not one of those adjectives that's on the 2014 map. Those are just the result of using other people's existing models. And then let me just take that a step further, because if I can show you the front page of the adjective map. Okay, let me just do this. I should have it already open. I've been sending it to you guys. This is it, the PDF for the adjective map. Do you see? Oh my goodness, sorry. I want to go back to, there you go. Do you see, even though we can't read the words on what's on your screen right now, do you guys see the density of adjectives that are plotting very far out grid, all along this high ability kind of range, high challenge kind of range? Do you see how many adjectives are appearing there compared to these relative wastelands of adjectives? More
Mm,
in-grid. Okay.
interesting.
Yeah. Now, why does that seem significant to me? Because, I fully accept the fact that I'm a little bit crazy, and I, for whatever reason, got pulled into doing this and noticing these overlaps and wanting to merge all these different models. And it served me very well career-wise. But now it's more of a thing that just says, hey, I want this finished. This is a really useful thing. And so I thought maybe what we are enabled to do now that we've done so much with the merging of brilliance and the circle of brilliance's discussions and that, maybe just maybe we have our own set of adjectives that we can start applying in these areas where very little is found. There is one right here, if I'm not right there, coordinates 1 and 3, pending. No adjective that we've come up with from any existing model that we've mapped goes there.
It was a mention, I said, well, I would drive it home, drive it home.
Is
Right.
that because you think you talked about we talked about before most of the work that we do is for people who are up, out, and down,
Yeah.
as opposed to the in,
Right.
right? It's if you think about this unprecedented change in human condition now with all this technology out, like the World Health itself just talk about loneliness as this epidemic, that's the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes. And so, you know, that's changing things, you know, our capacity to actually connect.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, how does that kind of thing impact?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of background noise, so let me just ask you guys to mute when, and then feel free to unmute and say whatever you'd like to say. Okay, yes, Brian, I think you're onto something really interesting when you look at the existing state, and I guess that's what I want you guys to think this is. This is the existing state of adjective mapping in the human development industry based on the models that have all been integrated. So this tells us, you know, what things look like if you just look out there at our industry. And our industry, not surprisingly, developed all kinds of assessments and all kinds of psychometric tools and things like that to describe the things that they were focusing on at the time. And we know that in our line of work, people bring us in to solve problems. So there's a focus on upgrade issues, and they bring us in to accomplish things. So there's a focus on outgrid sorts of things. And they even bring us in to awaken the dead. And so there's a lot of motivational, inspirational, you know, re-engagement sorts of stuff that we get brought in to do. And so I'm not surprised to see that there is these concentrations of adjectives that would resonate with where we as a profession have have had to focus our attention in order to be marketable. You guys have thoughts around that?
I think that context that Kathy talked about is one of the most important uh, aspects that we can address with this adjective map. Because think about a physician, right? Physician of physical diagnosis. I don't know the context that led to that. I don't know the context of what they'll get when they get a discharge. Like, how are they living? How are they going to apply whatever intervention is recommended?
Yes.
So, you know, that to me will make a difference in a lot of how we're positioning so-called help. You know, this context seems to be the missing piece in our time today in a world that's content heavy. You know, we call it information age, but everyone's overwhelmed with information, but we know very little about context, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. And so do you think that also explains why people's attention have been focused on the extremes?
Absolutely. For me, it
Extreme,
does.
yep,
Yeah.
extreme levels of ability. Now, it's also interesting that our language has a rather interesting, oh, T, you've unmuted, go right ahead.
Oh, no, I've been unmuted. I'm sorry.
Okay, all righty, no worries. I just see things jumping around up in the little attendee list over there. It's interesting that on the very far in-grid side of things, there's also quite a concentration of activities. Here I'm pointing with a pencil. I should be using my tools. All right, so I think that again, we're trying to describe a group of people who needed to be worked with or somehow. And you guys know people that are on the very far in-grid side of things tend to have low levels of self-esteem. And so if we're trying to help someone become a bit more assertive, we're trying to help someone get involved in the business world and on, step up, step out, all that sort of stuff. You know, there is a segment of the population that is looking for help in that regard. And so there they are. These are where those words came into play. I thought it was interesting. There's very few in the exact center.
Mm.
You would think that this whole world of being centered and focused, and there's some good words there. I mean, again, I can zoom in, but I didn't want to do that. I just wanted you to see just how dark certain areas of the adjective map look and how sparse others do. So when we're done, we'll have 1,440 distinct adjectives. Right now, I think there's about 1,100. So it looks like there's, you know, a lot of room, but really when you start filling them in, we've got a good deal already done. So that's my whole point. The emerging of brilliance, all that should have enabled us to perceive subtleties that other models have not focused on yet, so we can fill in the blanks.
Wow.
Is that interesting? Is that just, you know,
This
okay?
is a longitudinal project, yes?
Well, yeah, it's taken a long time, and I do believe every adjective is in constant motion. I do believe they're culturally specific. I do believe they're language specific. Even inside of the country, I mentioned last time around, I believe there's going to be regional differences, but I don't think a specific adjective is going to jump from 10-10 all the way over to 2-2. You know,
Right.
I think we're going to see subtle shifts around the adjective map. And so it's important that whatever map we build using standard American English and probably settle on one source of definitions, just so we can say this is an adjective map based on Webster's dictionary published in 2020, whatever, I don't know. And this is standard American English. This is where we're getting our definitions from. Yeah, then at least we've got that as a foundation that we've worked from. That said, keep in mind that each and every one of us brings our own values, our own beliefs, our own thoughts and feelings and knowings to these calls. And so there's going to be some significant discussions around where a particular adjective would actually live. And I did say last time around, some adjectives have multiple definitions, and those different definitions could plot in different places, and we make room for that as well. We've got a way to handle that as well.
Well, and that that allows where you found that there were some verbs or behaviors that were in each quadrant or two quadrants
Right.
because of the paradoxical viewpoint. You know, lazy is not really lazy, as you know. It
Yeah.
could be that it leads to improvement. And so being lazy allows you to improve the process
That's
more
right.
effectively and efficiently. That doesn't say you're lazy.
Nope.
But
You're just
so,
busy doing other things.
yeah.
And
And the other thing is, I know we've done this before, like back in the 1212 or something, like 2012 or something.
yeah.
And so it's good to resurrect it.
Yeah. I do believe it's the culmination of all the work that we do with the change grid. I mean, in all the conversations we have, we might be talking about this layer or that layer or some other layer just because it seems to fit into the conversation we're having. But ultimately, the whole result of the merging of brilliance is to show a merged result.
Mm.
And the change grid, that adjective, think of the adjective map as being a different layer. And it's on that final deepest layer that what you discover is all these adjectives. And I thought once you know that, I don't necessarily need all the other layers. The map itself is enough. If I ask people two perceptions and know two coordinates, I'm going to see a whole set of adjectives that I could be using for that particular situation. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's fascinating. I hope it's practical.
Hmm.
That's all. I want people to use it. And so now it just kind of a refresher for you guys. Whenever we are placing an adjective on the map, its address is the coordinate pair immediately to the left. So these words, clever, efficient, focused, urbane, witty, those all have the address of coordinates 8 and 10. Right? Not 9 and 10, no, it's 8 and 10. We use the coordinate pair to the immediate left of the block of activities as its address. You'll also notice the clever here is a number after it. Somehow, some way, we've got two different definitions of clever that we have mapped onto the change grid. And this is where definition number 1 for clever would be on the adjective map. Okay. One other thing I'll just give you guys as a reminder is that even though we use this coordinate pair as the address for this specific block of adjectives, does not mean that these adjectives are the only adjectives that appear at 810. What you actually do when you're using the change grid, this particular layer, is you go to the coordinate pair that the person gave you for their responses, and you read all 4 sets of adjectives surrounding it, because they might be leaning a little in grid, and compulsive and trusting is a little more in grid than efficient, focused, influential, urbane, and witty. um, Captive, charismatic, dynamic, energetic, impressive, and smooth with extra O's is a more expressive kind of set of adjectives than assertive, brief, decisive, direct, and fast. So hopefully you guys can see that it is in understanding that we look at all 4 blocks around us, around the address, around the coordinate pair, because that's where the subtleties and nuances actually live. Yeah. Yep, yep, yep. So,
This reminds me of when the Myers-Briggs really became more broad.
Yeah.
Instead of saying everybody's an ESTJ, there's subtleties in each one of those. And when you get into the subtleties, you can do more with it, just like you could do more with all of these. I like smooth because it's so many O's in there.
yeah, right, because I don't want people to think that we mean smooth.
Yeah.
No, we mean smooth, the smooth talker. This is where you're romancing and all that. Someone's being smooth. So,
That's interesting that T just mentioned that, because I was just thinking about that when I was going back to review Myers-Briggs. I think I've taken it like 7 or 8 times. It all comes out the same, even though I tried to botch it.
yeah,
And
no,
it
I hear
always
you.
comes out INFJ A. And I understand there's an INFJ T. I don't know what the difference is, but mine is an A.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think someone said that's an assertive, I think.
right, right,
But I don't know
right.
what the T
It's
is.
the subtleties, yes.
Yeah, it's in the subtleties of that. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Mhm.
I'm INTPA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, so yeah. Anyway, that was just a reminder for you guys, but I wanted you to now get into the how you go about mapping an adjective. All right, so any questions, comments about what we've reviewed so far? Oh, one thing I wanted to say to T and to anyone who is familiar with a particular model, it is absolutely true that good models that have got good people behind them, that are not devoting just a few weeks or months to creating a tool, but are spending years really using that tool, certifying people to use that tool, really doing a deep dive. They're doing something really interesting. But the adjective map that they're going to create, if they ever do, or however they want to package it, don't really care. It's all going to be based on how that one model got them to the understanding. When we're looking at the change grid, we're not looking at how one model reduced to its essentials looks. We're looking at how all of the models that have been included in the adjective mapping process or in the merging of brilliance process has happened. I don't know why my PDF just behaved that way, but it doesn't really matter. We're moving on. Okay. Questions, comments? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Oh, and if you do print it out and you want to actually put it on your wall as a poster and have it actually be usable, you got to go to a blueprint printing shop, if such a thing even exists anymore, because this needs to be printed out at least 3 feet by 3 feet for those adjectives to be readable if you want it to all be on a single document. So that's why we've had to zoom in to the 16 different areas and create deeper dives into each of those primary and secondary energies. So yeah, practically, you want a big one. Now, this, by the way, is a big one. It's we did this using a piece of image generation software, probably freehand, because I can't open it in Illustrator. So probably freehand many years ago, and you could actually zoom. It actually exists as a 3 foot by 3 foot document. We've just zoomed in on it or zoomed out on it to make it fit on a single piece of paper. Then if you go through the document I sent over to you, you'll see there is an upgrade quadrant, upgrade section, the expressive. So each one of them has that block of words at the center is whatever is going on for here. And I tried to make it large enough for you to view so you can see what's happening in the neighboring areas a little bit as well. So I think this is probably a good size for it to be as a bit of a field guide. Yeah. All right, thoughts? Nay? All right, then on to adjective mapping we go. So again, I think that there's going to be some general ones. And if I wanted to look again at something like the driver energy, I would say driven. I don't even know if it's on the adjective map. I haven't looked. I don't know if driven itself is on there or expressive or whatever. I don't recall if we ever put it on there or we just kept those off as our own sort of thing. But I would say that it probably lives in the center. If I can say in general terms, driven describes everyone who is in this quadrant. Yeah. Now, I can even say, well, it might have this impact zone, but nevertheless, there's going to be areas where it is truer than other areas. So what if I said to you, driven, there is no adjective in English that describes driven on steroids or driven squared or driven most, drivener. Is there some other word that describes driven that feels even more outgrid? And I can kind of think like, is a compulsion further outgrid? Is a passion further outgrid? So does driven not really describe someone who's passionate about doing something? Someone who's relentless in doing it, or those feel like more outgrid adjectives?
They seem more outgrid to me because when I think of passion, you have a certain physical behavior and your voice is more clear as it comes through.
Yep, yep,
And
yep,
you're more willing to speak up
yep.
and be expressive. So that's why I think it's somewhat out. Yeah, it is
A little
outgrid.
further outgrid and a little further upgrid
Mm-hmm.
than where we were. Right, right, right. And so again, just to kind of, I want to exercise this process for you guys. You got to really go like, no, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to flexibly say, well, the furthest person that's outgrid is as driven as you can get. Well, as driven as you can get, if the truth is there is no word better than driven to describe as driven as you can get, then you feel free to put driven right there. And its impact zone can still come all the way over, encompassing the outgrid area. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it doesn't necessarily have to be a full circle as you start to approach the edges of what we're looking at. Yeah. Personally, though, I think driven is in the center and it covers everything around here. Maybe it would be fair to say that if I was going to fill that circle with like a gradient fill, I would say that the further outgrid you are, the more driven you are, because we certainly say that, the more driven you are. But I think it encompasses all of the quadrant. Thoughts? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And if we said analytical, would you agree that everywhere in this downgrade quadrant would be accurately described as analytical, but maybe in different intensities, maybe in different sorts of ways, but it applies to everybody. If the adjective applies to everybody, we'd want to put it at the center of what's going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. Now, what's halfway between driver and analytical? That's that layer we were looking at here. That's the advocator. Well, its location here would say it touches upon the driven energy. Or do you guys want to say, no, the driven energy is going to extend even into the other quadrant because there's some of that upgrade energy that also has a drive to it. And there's some part of that downgrid element, even the in-grid element, that has a drive element or drive contributor to it. You guys with me on this?
Yeah.
Because now I'm going to show you where it comes from. Driver in the outgrid quadrant is in all capital letters. It is the primary energy. But even someone who's a driven expressive, a driven amiable, or a driven analytical has got a driver element. Describing them as being driven in the overall description we'd be sharing with them about that coordinate, we may find ourselves using that word driven. You with me? Because what that means is that its impact zone exceeds the quadrant that it might be in the epicenter of. It actually explodes beyond to a certain degree. You with me? Now, is this becoming tedious or is this still interesting?
No, I think it's interesting. What's coming to mind to me is I'm trying to uh, reason in my mind. So, like when we talk about outgrid kind of movement is driven by internal things. Will we say the same thing at that driven analytical aspect? Well, I would say upgrade would
Mhm.
be
Yeah, yeah.
external.
We would say that if you're a driven expressive, primarily you are being moved by external factors. However, if you happen to be here, you've got some stuff that's coming to you from your internal drive. Down here, you've got something coming from your intellect because it's an analytical expressive. So you've got other contributors that are happening, other contributors that are happening.
Right? Because essentially the word driver itself, when I'm thinking about something that is driven, I'm thinking like in terms of back to that context again, there's a motive there, like something is pulling, and the intensity of that is going to have an impact on that
Mhm.
where that zone is or where they end up in that zone.
Right, right, right. Now, again, when we're looking at the horizontal, the heart line, remember I say that we've got two input um, scales, and it's going to give rise to two output scales. So if I figure out where you are for perceived challenge and perceived ability, that's going to tell me where you are when it comes to your level of tension and your level of what. So tension is vertical. What's happening horizontally?
Drive.
The drive. So am I then saying, and again, I'm doing all this just to get your guys, thoughts working, um, as mine may very disturbingly have done. But does the amiable need a little driver energy too?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so well, right there, that spot is now the tertiary energy. This person would be a driven amiable driver. This is a driven expressive amiable, a driven amiable expressive, a driven expressive expressive. So that whole idea about feeling driven to me actually encompasses the entire change grid, which is why we can get away with using it as a continuum, but it would need its most pronounced expression to be way over here, the driven driver kind of element, maybe 1111. Maybe we don't like doing 1212s. Do you guys agree with me on this, or again, does that mean anything to us?
Yeah.
When you start talking about the different levels, I think while we do this, I think examples might be good too,
Yeah.
because people can get lost in the definitions, and examples might be good, and that's difficult to come up with.
I think you're right. What I'm hoping that comes out of it, though, is that maybe when we get the adjective map where we're all very fluent in it, comfortable with it, I can say, let's go to 710 and let's come up with an example that we can put into like a field guide that encompasses the adjectives that are surrounding it. Because this could very well be describing whatever the situation is. This individual is being captivating, charismatic, and dynamic, but they're doing it. That's their driver expression of what's going on, relatively speaking. And being adventurous and eager and energizing and motivating, that's their more expressive contributor. And cooperative and supportive over here on the amiable side, compulsive and trusting, a little bit downgrid. Does that feel like a particular role or a particular scenario where someone would really do well to behave in this combination of adjectives? Yeah. Anybody got an example in mind? Okay, I'm thinking of a very fun leader, and we're doing some kind of a, project that we're trying to get done. So whether it's a group building kind of a thing, team setting. I mean, think of you see where it really is. Yeah,
I think of some of the TED Talks when I think of 710, because they are smooth and impressive and energetic and dynamic and
yeah,
charismatic.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you can almost visualize them like Tony whatever.
Right, right. And they see some of this upgrade energy too when they're up on stage, energizing and motivating, persuasive. But then over here, they want to make sure they're connecting with the audience, so cooperative and supportive. But they got to keep you focused. So there's going to be a certain element there. Compulsive might be a little strong kind of a word, but ultimately each one of those people is trying to sell you on something, whether it's they're selling you a thing or whatever. They're selling you an idea, if nothing else. So I think there's an analytical requirement that you be clear in what it is that you're trying to get people to do, that you have great faith in what you're telling them that you need to do. You're on board, you want to get them on board as well. Does that all, as we describe that, does that kind of become a useful, I don't want to say stereotype, but a character that we might be able to say is best communicates these coordinates?
Yes, yes. In fact, businesses use this, right? Create avatars that they create marketing messages around based on
Well,
the
if they do, I'd like to see their maps. But yeah, I agree. They
they
use
do.
all
They,
kinds of
yeah,
persuasive words. Yeah,
and that's exactly what they call themselves, persuasion engineers, when they
that's
hire behavioral scientists to help them with that.
that's right. That's right. And you got to believe this is where they are now. Depending on what they're trying to sell you, maybe they're better off at 610. So they're energizing and motivating and persuasive and charming and jovial, suave. It's a different energy. Uh,
Hmm.
who do you want to follow? 610 or 710?
Yeah, probably more 710.
Probably more 710. 710 seems to know a little bit more about what's good. They're not using personality so much, not so much expressive. But again, I want you guys to go as we're doing this. Everything is relative. And so when I get to 710, I still have an outgrid element going on, an upgrid, an ingrid, and a downgrid element going on. Whether we use that as a coordinary energy or whatever, it's all happening. Yep, yep, yep,
And
yep.
think about the marketing messages now. With back in the States, the FOMO in terms of Black Friday, all these kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you'll play with that. Let's say that you've got two people to choose from who can become the spokesperson for whatever your agenda happens to be. One of them is at 710 and the other one is at 5-8.
Mm.
So look at 5-8.
Oh,
You think this person is going to be a very effective spokesperson?
you're not going to be able to follow them.
Well, I'm looking at these words and going like, well, I can see value in them, but not in that particular behavior that
Right.
we're trying to target. If they're plotting at 5-8 and about to step in front of an audience, what do you think I'm going to do? Because I know they're adaptable and tactical. That tells me their driver element energy is going to compel them to stay on track, deal with whatever's coming your way. They're going to give it the old college try, you know, and maybe they're good on their feet. They can be impromptu and inventive and stimulating, innovative, self-confident. I don't think they're going to embarrass us.
Uh,
You know what I mean? But I
yeah.
think they're going to be very different in front of an audience than 7 and 10
Yeah.
is going to be. What do you guys think? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we can also use the adjective map to help people decide ideal locations on the change grid for certain things that need to be done. Now, maybe the spokesperson should really be, let me see if I can go here, upgrid, downgrid. No. I want to make them upgrid and outgrid. So let me scroll through. Sorry that I'm doing this, but you guys have this. The outgrid quadrant, the upgrid section. No, I want the outgrid quadrant, the outgrid section. Here we go. All right, so you can scoot around all you want. Well, rather than sending 710 to do the job, where you're up here, this little set of words we just looked at, let's say instead, no, I want you to send 1010. 1010 is now your spokesperson. Aggressive, demanding, dominating, forceful. That's the outgrid elements. Abrupt, competitive, controversial, impatient, pioneering, pushy, but a visionary. That's what's going on the upgrade side of things. Accomplished, authoritative, leading, powerful, proud, reality based. If they're leading inward, okay. Otherwise, ceaseless, frank, outspoken, resistant, strict. Do you want this person representing you in public?
Jeez. Sounds like a general.
And they are. They could be the best leader as long as they stay here on that, that amiable energy is what's leading the day. As long as they are an amiable, driven driver, I'm probably feeling all right, but I'd be happier if they were just a balanced driver. Again, this block of adjectives belongs to coordinate 9-9, but nevertheless, right now it is the amiable side of this quartet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah. If they stay there, maybe, just maybe they're introducing me, maybe they're delivering a keynote talk and they're coming across as being a little bit visionary, pioneering, be competitive, they're basically presenting themselves as being very direct, in charge, reality based, but they're headstrong. We're going to do this. I can kind of hear a certain message being delivered effectively with primarily the amiable set, but a little bit of the upgrade or downgrade set as well. But if they're come across as forceful, intimidating, et cetera, what do you think's happening to their effectiveness as a leader?
that's going to go down.
It's going down. All right. So now you think about just what we've done with the adjective map. Could you go into someone who's trying to build a team of people and say, you're going to need someone here, you're going to need someone here, you're going to need someone here, and someone here.
Mhm.
So these are what we're looking for. This is who we're trying to train, develop, identify, whatever it happens to be. If they really understand that people's behavior resonates with certain situations and may not resonate with every other situation, I think that we can use this very much to their help, to their benefit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't even do that by role. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
yeah. Now
a lot
you're
of-
generalizing it a little bit more, but absolutely, absolutely.
because a lot of these innovation communities that I speak with, they're trying to bring people together with different talent disciplines and those kinds of things to work on projects together.
Yeah, yeah.
And
How many of them
so,
end up with an 11-11?
yeah, yeah. So, the community is the product, and so you need people that can work together. But if they're 11-11, that's not going to happen too well.
No, no. And by the way, 12-12 doesn't have its own set of adjectives, but if someone plotted a 12-12, I'd be saying to you, I say you read everything around it. Yeah. Keep in
Mhm.
mind that you're looking at where all four danger zones come together right there. So you would have to move around to show the dark side of the change grid to what's going on. But we're just saying, no, this is as bad as your driver energy is likely going to get before you're going to really have some very unhealthy response to what's going on. Yep. Okay, anyway, all right, we got a few more minutes now.
About in the negotiations, uh,
Okay,
like, well, I don't even want to talk about the Israel-Hamas war, but like how they make choices and decisions based on, whether to cease fire or to not, and
all right,
to
so let's think about that. I don't know what adjective we're going for yet, but let's go at it energetically. So what should be the primary energy of a negotiator in, well, really any sort of a situation, but particularly that one? Primary energy?
primary should be amiable, right? Well,
Mm,
it should be driven. You got to get something done, but you need the amiable part.
all right, let's see. How amiable
It's
do you want to
driven.
go? Let me zoom around here. Okay, this is the amiable driver. So if you read all of them, approachable, confident, brave, requiring, self-motivated, just, straightforward, courageous, responsible, dependable, loyal, tuned in, time sufficient, consistent, unemotional, unswerving. Is that who you want at the negotiations table?
No.
The way
No,
that you sort it out is read the next little, I don't know, arrowhead. I don't know what to call this shape. I'm sure it has a name. But anyway, let's kind of look at that next little layer out. Maybe I want to be a little more assertive, decisive, direct, a little more authoritative, reality based,
and that's
determined, independent, insightful. How many of you wanted a little bit more like this?
I
yeah.
would do that.
Yeah. So maybe that moved it now over here to go, no, that's a 9-9 as far as ideally. Do I want a 9-9? What would be the problem with me having a 10-10 running the negotiation instead of a 9-9?
They're not negotiating, are they? At 10-10.
You're just
That-
pushing.
They can
Yeah.
be, yeah, it's what he's just saying there. There, as long as they stay on this amiable side of things we're showing right now, we're good to go. But unfortunately, if they go outside of that danger zone on that other side of 10-10, there's all kinds of warmongering stuff. We gotta keep out of there. So 9-9 is probably as far outward as I would want to go. Do you think you want to send more of an analytical driver or an expressive driver? Or
I'd
just
rather have analytical than a.
Analytical. Yeah, you
I'm
have to see the
thinking-
moving parts.
I want to know if there's going to be a negotiation, something all that. You know, they're going to be talking about logistics. They're going to be talking about supplies, humanitarian behaviors. They got to know their details.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking maybe a little bit of that downgrade energy, maybe being determined and entrepreneurial and insightful. Maybe that's enough. But maybe I say, no, maybe it needs to be a little more specific, a little more thorough. Or maybe it's not a negotiator, it's a negotiations team. And there's someone on there who can take care of a little bit more of this interpersonal and detail driven stuff. But that lead negotiator, maybe I want him to be, do I want him to be an expressive, um, captivating and smooth? Why do I think that's not going to help at the negotiations table? Huh.
Being smooth doesn't really make it, they're more concerned about themselves.
Yeah, they're
real
they're
outcome.
going to, yeah, they're romancing the deal. That's no. But maybe a little bit of clever, influential, urbane. I don't know about witty at that table. Again, we do tell people that as they look around the adjectives surrounding the address, not all of them are going to apply. We want to know which ones of them, to Daniel's point earlier, which of these are really resonating with you, which one seems to be describing what's really going on. So again, we got to decide now, is that an adjective, by the way, if I say that they are the lead negotiator of something, is there an adjective that describes the essence of that person who's a lead negotiator? Maybe we need one, and let's put it on here, but it would belong to one of these in the surrounding 9-9. That's where that best gets performed. Okay, is this interesting for everybody? Most of you stayed on. One of you I knew needed to leave early. But yeah, that's what I want to do. Now, right now we've just been talking about the adjectives you see. And now we're saying like there's an adjective we're looking for to describe that grand negotiator, ideal negotiator kind of energy. Is it already here? Do we need it to be there? I don't know. You guys need to suggest some stuff, or we need to ask Chat GPT to give us some adjectives that describe the essential elements of that.
So
The
when
other-
you were in the
yeah.
map, were you thinking from that perspective, or that how you some of these came about, like different roles, like you say negotiator as opposed to lead negotiator, as opposed to a team?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It works both ways.
Uh,
I'll either ask them, can you tell me how you want this person to be behaving? And they're going to give me a bunch of, adjectives. Well, I can use the search feature. This is a PDF. It's fully searchable. I can use the search feature to pull me to a particular place in the document. And once it does that, I can say, well, let's look at the other ones around here and use it a little bit more, that I've given this set of suggestions to get the ball rolling, I've primed the pump a little bit. But I can also have them be describing someone and they'll go, this isn't quite it. There's another element that these are close, but it's missing something. And that's where in the old days, I'd have to kind of see what I could figure out on my own. Well, now you could go to Chat GPT and see what it wants to suggest, adjective wise.
right. Because see, when I was designing some HR software, we were talking about burnout and stress in the corporations. It was interesting to me that very few corporations, and we're talking about these big corporations, very few had a model for performance. So they'll say they wanted high performing people or teams.
Yeah.
They knew how to model financials, 3 to 5 year projections, but no one, when we asked, well, what does that look like for you? no
Mhm.
one had an answer
Well,
for
they
it.
don't. They don't. Yeah, yeah. No, asking an executive what they want can end up being tooth pulling, teeth pulling, because they don't know. They haven't thought about it in those terms. They just know what the general outcome is, and that's okay because that energy really does best when it stays focused on the big picture and allows the details to be done by others. Unfortunately, sometimes those details render their vision more challenging, if not impossible. And so, then maybe you got to force them to have a little bit of that. It's interesting. You use the adjective high performing. It's nowhere on the change grid. So we
Mm,
could go, let's find high performing. Who's highest performing when we're looking at things energetically.
mm.
So I guess I gave you a long answer to say we do it both ways. We are either looking for an adjective or we are using the adjective map to understand the energy of what's going on in a particular area. Yeah.
Kind of neat to me. I like it.
Yep, yep, yep. Oh, I should also tell you guys that I'm going to take attendance for all these calls. At the end of every one of the calls, there's a report that says who was on it and all that sort of stuff. And it gives kind of a score about the participation level and all that sort of things. So I thought, if we really are going to do this and say, let's really finish this, let's finish this on, I would be more than happy to have co-developers named on the whole thing, that it's,
Mhm.
these are the people who put this map together. It's not just me, it's emerging of brilliance. So yeah, so I want to make sure I'm going to be giving credit where credit is due for this sort of thing. If you guys find it interesting, if you don't, well then, terribly sorry. Yeah. Um, all right, so well, we're at the top of the hour. The only other thing I was going to do was I was going to throw out an adjective and let you guys just very quickly play with it. So if I gave you the adjective of stupefied, okay, so where would stupefied be on the
Wow.
change grid? Okay, you are, yeah, there's other words you use, dumbstruck, you are stupefied by whatever it is you are witnessing or involved in. So what energy would you say is primary in the world of stupefaction?
Driven,
Is upgrade?
present driven.
Okay, all right. So I hear there's a driver energy going in. There's also a bit of an expressive energy that's
Yeah.
being described. Um, so let me see if I can scroll enough to zoom in on there. Where's my zoomer inner thing? Okay, we're upgrid and outgrid a little bit.
Mhm.
Stupefied. Let's see around here what's going on.
Uh,
Adaptable? No, I'm more puzzled than that, aren't I?
Yeah, yeah, like dazed. That's the word that comes to mind to me.
Right. And see, we'd be writing all these secondary adjectives down, going like maybe they belong on there. Stupefied. If I
It,
look here, go ahead.
it tempted. That says hectic. What does that say? Does it say superficial?
Where
Hectic?
you at?
Oh yeah.
Give me your coordinate pair.
That that
310.
yeah, 310.
Superficial, hedonic, tempted, aimless, cynical, irresponsible, repetitious, unreliable, wasteful.
It seems more down
Yeah,
grid.
more down. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like
Yeah, we're right. It's like you're why you're stupefied is because I think you're witnessing something that is so profoundly stupid that you are stupefied. But we'd actually have to look it all up.
but
But
this is terrible. I was thinking of it in a different way though. I think of I know that this is Harry Potter stuff, but when they say stupefied, that means it knocks the other person out.
oh, right. Well, stupefaction, I think, makes them silent. And what else? Or does it freeze them in place?
Kind of. Yeah.
Fact,
Kind of
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're so surprised by it. Like this befuddled, you're
right.
just like,
I think, yeah.
what?
So I think, yeah, does that spell render someone stupid?
No,
I don't think
No.
so. I think it
no.
just
But there's curious, I see this curious there. Uh,
mhm. Non-conforming, impromptu, enthusiastic, amorous.
Stimulating. It could stimulate because you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on.
That's all right. Now, what we're doing right now is we're adjective mapping by wandering around. There's different methodologies involved. Some of it really is by wandering around, looking for inspiration from another word. But really, we should be approaching this energetically. I think the primary energy of stupefied is upgrid. I think it's primarily an expressive energy because it's something you're feeling and there's a physical element to it. I know. But
It's almost like it's in the 2-9 area.
the 2-9 area, let's come
Yes,
up
I
here a little bit.
Emotional, messy, present, scattered.
Yeah, so now we're saying that puts it on the border, by the way, between an expressive and an amiable expressive.
No,
But
it's not
right here
amiable.
on a downgrid element.
I
Scattered,
don't think it's
inconsistent, stupefied.
No, I don't think that's it.
No.
Is it hopeful? Is it? Okay, fine. All right, you guys are getting the whole point here. What I'm trying to do is say if we look at the energies, maybe it'll get us there. What would the secondary energy be in stupefied?
Hmm.
Is stupefied a driver? Secondary energy. We want to make something happen.
I think it's expressive.
So it's an expressive kind of a thing.
Yeah, because I don't think you're trying to get at something. I think it is like it just happened.
All right, so we're moving up grid. We're moving up grid. Stupefied. So right now we said we're an expressive. What kind of an expressive? Are we a driven expressive? Burned out, egotistical?
No.
It's almost
Analytical?
311, maybe.
311.
Opportunistic, rowdy, show off.
Okay, stupefied. Picture stupefied in there. Now, what if I go up here and go, if we're all the way up grid, so 011, we have delusional, doomed, frozen, imperiled, terrified. I don't think stupefied is that bad.
No.
No. Got to come down.
It's haphazard, unpredictable. Okay, there's element of that. Fickle, threatened, undisciplined, angry, changeable, forgetful, frightened, grieving, reactive, sorrowful, excitable, blah, blah, blah. All right. I wanted to do this for a few minutes just so you guys can kind of get the feel for it. What's your final choice? Do you want an expressive, an analytical expressive?
Would that be the 211?
Is it going to be 211, 111, 211, 210, 110? These are your four tertiary energies, unless you want to go along to the border. So T was recommending scooting down a little bit further.
Yeah, because I like that one. Yeah, 311. So I like that obnoxious, egotistical, aimless, cynical, opportunistic.
Stupefied.
Yeah.
Stupefied.
Yeah, you fit into the hedonic and superficial, tempted. I could see some of those and that quad there.
All right. Now, I chose, this is my kind of final comment. I chose that adjective on purpose. I chose that adjective because I wanted to illustrate an adjective that doesn't really need to be on the change grid. Okay, that doesn't really deserve to be, doesn't really belong. Maybe it's because it's outdated. Maybe it's because we've got other adjectives that describe that situation more usefully to us. So I do find a lot of times we'll come up with an adjective and we just say there really isn't a specific good place for that. Even if I give stupefied a much larger impact zone, still it doesn't really seem to, maybe flaky, unfocused. I don't know. I'm saying to you guys, it's not necessary for us to come up with an answer for every adjective. It's perfectly okay for us to say, put that in the bowl, in the fish bowl, and maybe we'll get back to it someday. Today is not that day. So
it does give you a lot to work with.
It gives. I'm sorry, Daniel, we can't hear you very well. Yeah. No, I'm sorry, man. We can't hear you there. Okay, anyway, Daniel, you want to chat over to me, whatever it is you'd like to share, I'll share it with the group. Otherwise, if you guys are finding this interesting enough, then we can continue this. And hopefully it grows into a project that we're all learning from and we're all enjoying. I think one of the best ways for us to accomplish that is to give one another one little piece of homework. That little piece of homework is that this week I'd like you to, for between now and the next time we have a conversation on this, I'd like you to think about a particular adjective. You can choose one that's already on here if you want. You can come up with your own if you want, whatever you want to do. But I'd like you to be able to come to our discussion with a definition of that adjective, with an idea about primary, secondary, and tertiary energy, which would give us a bit of a location for it on the change grid, and think a little bit about that impact zone. Does it apply with a big impact zone, or is it pretty tight to the coordinates that you're talking about? All right, so if you guys want to do some of that, it'll make this a lot more fun, and I think we'll get the adjective map done.
Yeah. That's going to be fun. I can think of some adjectives for health that might help me.
You feel free. You will feel free. I will tell you another thing is ultimately we'd like to also make sure that the adjective map is balanced. So sometimes it's good to not only think about an adjective, but think about the opposite of that adjective and see if that's something we can put in the polar opposite. Ideally, if it is the opposite, it should fit graphically, visually in the opposite side of things, in the opposite space.
So what do you mean by the opposite?
I mean, the opposite, look right here, if you look at the center of this, of the expressive quadrant, if you give me the opposite of any of these words, those words should be all the way down here in this spot, the opposites. If they're truly opposites, then they should be opposite. I mean, that's what opposite means.
Okay, got it.
All right. Okay, with that, thank you all very much for joining in. We will talk again soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.